Today we're going to look at Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, published in 1953. He writes, "The temperature at which book paper catches fire and burns is at 451 degrees. So when we take a look at the idea of fire, the hearth or fireplace is a traditional symbol of the home, and the salamander is one of the official symbols of the firemen, as well as what they call their fire trucks. Now, both of these symbols have to do with fire, the dominant image of Montag's life. The hearth because it contains the fire that heats a home, and the salamander because of ancient beliefs that it lives in fire and is unaffected by flames. So when we take a look at Fahrenheit 451, we have this sense of a dystopia. But let's take a look at what utopian and dystopian literature are. A utopian literary background would be literature that describes an imaginary, ideal world, whereas dystopian literature is literature that describes an imaginary world that is highly unpleasant. Fahrenheit 451 is a dystopian novel. Now, the novel was written by Ray Bradbury, a celebrated science fiction writer from the United States. It began as a short story in 1951 and evolved into a novel by 1953. Now, the novel was written at a time when the world was threatened by nuclear war, new technologies were emerging, and the world was getting smaller. When we take a look at the historical context at the time, World War II had ended only a few years before. We had the threat of nuclear war. It was also the era of McCarthyism, where we were looking at to see who was a communist. It could have been your neighbor next door. It could have been a famous author or somebody working in Hollywood. Many sci-fi books and movies reflected a lot of this fear, the fear of after what happens in the war and this fear of communism. So the lasting effects of World War II, Hitler had just been defeated, and during his powerful reign, he burned many books. Now, even before and after World War II, the Soviet Union also banned and burned many books through its Communist Party. And as communism spread, China also began to burn books. Now, by 1950s, 60% of Americans were considered middle class, and this would be from their consumerism, what they would go and buy. The electronics industry also became the fifth largest post-war. Television was both very popular and controversial. Now, in 1956, the Interstate Highway Act led to the American automobile culture, and in 10 years, the number of cars on the road increased by 20 million. But remember, even with all of this production and all this progress, there was still always the threat of nuclear war and fear. There would be drills in schools for children to learn where to go in the case of a threat of nuclear war. There would be special bells and special sirens around towns that would inspire fear in all generations because they would practice this threat. And when McCarthyism, when we have just McCarthy from Wisconsin coming along, questioning who is a communist and what we should do about it, we started to question the integrity of the U.S. government. There was a movement where fear of communism became widespread. And the practice of making accusations of disloyalty, subversion, or treason without proper regard for evidence became commonplace. So then we wonder, with the story of Ray Bradbury, is it a prediction or a prevention of something? Well, Bradbury claimed he was trying to prevent the future. He did foresee many future developments while he was writing. For example, he saw the future of Walkmans, where people would have radios or music that they could take with them. Earbuds, where you could just listen to the music on your own and not have others hear it. Big screen and interactive TVs. The rise in violence, the growing sense of illiteracy, and condensation of info into just sound bites. So as the 1950s and the Cold War progressed, Ray Bradbury saw the government taking a great deal of power over the people, and this worried him. How could a government with too much power be dangerous? After all, they're elected in by the people. They're supposed to be working for the people. Well, Ray Bradbury saw the world changing quickly and dangerously, and this is why he wrote Fahrenheit 451, to warn people of what would happen if society continued down what he believed was a dangerous path. For example, in 1945, there were fewer than 10,000 television sets in the United States, but 5 years later, there was now 6 million, and by 1960, there was more than 60 million. And as you can see in the picture, a lot of times people would set their children in front of the television to kind of babysit them after school. They would sit right before or after their dinners to watch the national news, and they would take to heart everything that was being told to them. Now, this novel was written by Ray Bradbury, a celebrated science fiction writer, and it began as a short story in 1951 and evolved as a novel by 1953. Now, it's also set in the 24th century. Now, books are considered dangerous and illegal at that time. Nobody's allowed to own them. Most people are happy being plugged into their technology where they don't have to think too hard. All books that are found are eventually burned. Now, in this 24th century, the firefighters aren't there to stop fires. They're actually there to start them. And remember, Fahrenheit 451 is a type of dystopian or dystopic novel. That means it's about a future that is bleak, dark, and dreary. Now, as you start reading, you're going to be focusing on two central themes of the novel. The sense of censorship, where the people are listening to and only believing what the government tells them. And the ignorance of knowledge. Everything else that they might possibly need to know or want to know has been taken away from them. Specifically, the ideas of books and being able to plug them into listening to whatever the government wants them to know. Well, what is censorship? It is the suppression of speech or deletion of communicative material which may be considered objectionable, harmful, sensitive, or inconvenient to the government or the media organizations as determined by a censor. And the other theme, the ignorance of knowledge. Ray Bradbury focuses on the importance of learning and how it impacts our ability to make decisions. He believes that without the ability to think about what we're doing, we'll be led to do wrong. What you might also want to look for in the book is that sense of individual self-expression, when somebody actually breaks the norm and decides to have a coherent thought of their own. That violence is self-destructive. If you're going to start fires, if you're going to start violence, you're actually hurting yourself. And mindless pleasure-seeking and materialism makes for an empty life. You're always seeking more. You're never satisfied. And lastly, humanity should preserve and value the culture of the past. We should also look to see that humanity has the ability to be reborn or revived. After all, even though this is a dystopian novel and there's a lot of negativity in it, there is this sense of rebirth, this idea that we can come back from being plugged in and tuned out. Now, in the wrong hands, modern technology can certainly be dangerous. Commercialism can erode spiritual values or erode the sense of individuality. And people lose their humanity when not able to communicate and interact with each other on a personal level. There will also be symbols throughout the book. First of all, Fahrenheit 451 is the level of degree in which a book can burn. You've got firefighters who actually start fires, so fire is going to be a good symbol to look for, as well as the actual burning process. Because we have fire, we are also going to be looking for the symbolism of water. We talked very briefly before about the salamander, how they had this belief that the salamander can represent fire because apparently it is untouched by fire. You'll also be looking in this particular book for a mechanical hound. And watch the titles of each section. Check out what the titles are that Ray Bradbury himself has given to each section of his story. Thank you so much for stopping by for an introduction of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. If you'd like me to go chapter by chapter through this book, or if you'd like to learn more about Ray Bradbury's other books, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what else you'd like to learn. And as always, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed.